data. And that's an aggressive step. Our part brand is organized.
stands to be true.
All right. So our research.
So we're doing a lot of stuff.
Of the Wilmington Street Park program. Right, and we have 4 funded studies in gun violence, right? And then underneath and within that circle, you also have 1 unfunded, right, but real analysis by Dr. Naomi Sada in the department, in the psychological sciences, brain sciences department. Oh God, okay, the psychology department here at UD, right? In addition to that, we also have 2 other funded projects, right, particularly in the housing rubric. So, Ann, do you want to talk about housing real quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was just giving a pointer so you all could see what we're talking about, because I know it's a big visual there. So in terms of housing, I've been fortunate to obtain a General University research grant. And so we, and along with my colleague out there, Dr. Collier, we looked at latent class analysis, specifically thinking about street identified folks and their housing status. And then some of the stuff that goes with that, we'll actually be presenting more on that a little bit later. And then the other study is a Youth Participatory Action Research Program, which focuses on the community of Riverside. Riverside has huge housing projects, which it's about to go what they are terming community transformation. As a native of Chicago, what I know is that it is gentrification in transformation, right, language. So our goal was to work with young people whose families are being impacted by the gentrification, so they understand what is housing, what does community transformation look like versus gentrification, what is structural violence, right, what is redlining. So we went through a lot of those kinds of concepts to empower young people to think about, right, their worlds in different ways.
Also, just really quickly, we have other areas of our research program that aren't necessarily funded, but that are real working committees or working groups. We have a set of scholars working on a set of policing papers. That's Dr. Ivan Sun, also Dr. Janae Miller, also Dr. Brooklyn Hitchens as well, and a bunch of other folk, Dr. Angela Hatterdery, and also Dr. Earl Smith, all working on policing or police-related papers. And there are a number of student-related projects and some other working papers. Okay. Right, this is the first, so we just want to share with you real briefly just some of the projects that have come out of this research program. The first one, which is the foundational project, is called the People's Report, right? And/or we often refer to ourselves as the Wilmington Street Park family, right? This study actually we started training them in fall of 2009. And next slide. Right, and so we had 12 men, 3 women. We also work with a robust institutional partnership of 3 universities and 5 nonprofits, particularly for that one project. That study was also funded by Barack Obama's and Joe Biden's American Recovery Reinvestment Act. It was a state block grant, right, that was actually matched by the University of Delaware. So lots of folk came together to create the foundation for this movement that we have in the state of Delaware. Right, you can go on our website, thepeoplesreport.com, and check out our report. It's a 173-page report, single spaced, I might add, right? And and a number of folk have checked it out over the years. Right, our second project, particularly with Christianity Care Hospital. So we have another project with them on gun violence, and understanding violence is a public health issue. Right, we have 2 NIH grants that fund different arms or parts of the same or larger study. Right, it's probably the best way to understand it. Next slide. right? And as with the first study, we were in the Southbridge and East Side sections of Wilmington. With this particular study, we're in the other side of town, and or the North Side, and or the West Side, or 4 neighborhoods within those 2 sections, right? North Side, that's Riverside Housing, that's an area or street corner over there, and I think West Center City, I think. Cool, great gravy. From that study, and we're still collecting data, and there are other data probably that we have collected and represented here. But nonetheless, right, we collected nearly 700 surveys. Right, this is of a 45-page instrument, co-designed by folk from the community with folk from the university. Right, $40 per participant. Right, we collected nearly 400 blood pressure tests, approximately 100 interviews, at least 24 field observations, and we counted it all up. We're putting somewhere in the ballpark of about $37,000 in cash, right, through this project, right, in those neighborhoods. Next slide.
So when you're thinking about these projects, all these different projects that we have, you know, there's a large consideration to the field operations. And, you know, as Dr. Payne mentioned, you have extensive training of PAR members and street PAR members, and really just training individuals and orienting them, well in the projects and the work and the importance of the work that we do. There's exceptional consideration made towards data collection sites, participant recruitment, operations, and so on. Next slide. And one of the most important things is always the team, you know, making sure that we have a team that has strong social capital, indigenous knowledge of the neighborhood, but probably one of the most important things is that they have care and respect for the individuals that we're working with in the community. Next.
Now we'll play a video for you all.
This is where the revolution starts. We don't know either the spiritual revolution, either the social revolution, either the cultural revolution, either the economic revolution.
I don't think we can do another, we can do more than 25 with the time we were
So as you can see, that was actually the last project that we were working on, the health project. There was a lot going on there, as you can see. And this was just a cycle of operations. So we were collecting blood pressure data from individuals as they came in. We implemented the survey with them, individual survey reviews, Individuals had an opportunity to do individual, dual, or group interviews, and then a cash incentive. Next slide. And just looking at this project, we had, quite a few challenges there. We had an overwhelming turnout for this project. And you see it on the video, we were actually at the Achievement Center in Wilmington, Delaware, and there were hundreds of people waiting to come in and participate in this survey. Some of the other challenges we ran into were reading comprehension, balancing with children and families in the space, and just some social emotional issues that were going on amongst the community members. Some basic solutions: we established our baseline times, used a ticketed system, and staggered our interviews to be able to handle these different cohorts of people. And we found that we could do 2 to 3 cohorts per day. We actually had to started reading the instrument to individuals and allowing for them to fill out the survey if they had any issues of reading comprehension. And then some basic stuff, just some food, snacks, and alternate spaces to be able to work with the children. Honoring the process and respecting the people. So this is big, huge for us. Dr. Payne has always emphasized to us to make sure that we honor this process and that we're dealing with human beings in their various conditions in life, and making sure that we respect them, keeping media away, at really structuring when we have media come in, and making sure that we allow for people to be heard when they come out. So this is Out of the Ashes and Missing Dad. These are 2 programs that also came out of the Street Park program. Out of the Ashes is a fatherhood and family restoration program that myself, my son, and Patricia Harris has put together. And Missing Dad is a podcast that comes out of the Ashes as well, where we explore fatherhood and the importance of fatherhood. So one of the other things that is huge for us is, again, we'll talk about relationships a lot and social capital. And we see this as being the foundation of the work that we do, building trust in communities so that individuals feel comfortable sharing with us some of their intimate experiences. And we definitely focus on healthy communities, making sure that we deal with individual social, emotional, as well as physical health. You notice we had different projects with the health project that we did with CRSEA Care, but also the Wilmington Up and things of that nature. And we really try to make sure that we're building more healthier, robust communities.
So a little bit more on Wilmington Up. So the bleeding out phenomenon is the #1 cause of preventative post-injury hemorrhaging in the US. So what we have is that a lot of people are literally bleeding out on the street corner while they're waiting for paramedics to arrive. And the bleeding out phenomenon persists because poor Black communities are disproportionately in trauma deserts, right? Where they have disparate access to level 1 trauma centers. And so in a place like Wilmington, it can take you up to 45 minutes to get to a level 1 trauma center if you are shot in the city, despite the fact that there are level 2 and 3 trauma centers in the city of Wilmington. So because we believe in combating injustice such as this, we partner with CRSEA Care to implement Wilmington Under Pressure, and we trained over 250 community residents on how to stop the bleed, how to apply pressure to a wound in the event of a shooting in Wilmington. And in my dissertation work, just as another aside, focuses on the data from the North Side and the West Side Street Park study, but I keenly focus on the experiences of street identified Black women and girls. And so the narrative that's often told or shared about urban violence predominantly focuses on the experiences of Black men and boys. But my work examines how not only are Black women and girls affected as direct victims at times, but they're also vicarious victims, as they're often tasked with the burden of grief and coping when the men in their lives are killed or harmed.
All right, the last project we want to briefly share with you is a nationally funded study by the Arnold Ventures Foundation for the National Collaborative of Gun Violence Research. Right, so there are about 18 awards, I believe, given out, at least in our round. And the name of our study is called Got the Hammer on Me, the Social Cultural Roots of Gun Violence. And we have joined with Dr. Elise White at the Center for Court Innovation to do this study in 5 cities. Right, this is our organizational chart just for that one study. This is how it breaks out. So we have 5 cities. We are in Baltimore, Detroit. We're in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. We're also obviously in Wilmington, Delaware, and we are in New Orleans, right? And each city is set up with a project director, and underneath that project director, you have a senior research associate, and that senior research associate closely supervises 4 street par associates. Right? We brought members from all cities together in New York, right, for 3 days in February of 2020 to have an all-day national training, right, particularly research methods training, right? We then went back to our respective cities where we held 9 sessions or 9 research method workshops around, to get ready for the study. Right. And for the most part, we're interested in examining to what extent does structural violence, which is another one of our big theories, but structural violence, right, the intentionality of inequality, right, to what extent is that predictive of gun violence? And ultimately, we're arguing that gun violence is a site of resilience, that it does make sense. We're not saying that it's good or ethical. Never met anybody who shot someone or sold drugs that thought that was actually a good or bad thing, right? Nonetheless, it is the way that they are surviving, particularly within context, right, that is struggling with structural violence. For this particular study, we're definitely doing street par, but we're also drawing on a new methodology for us, a new sampling technique called RDS, or respondent-driven sampling, to get a total of 750 participants in each of these cities, right? And we're doing 1 hour-long survey / interviews with the participants. Right, and that breaks down to about 150 interviews per city. The interviews are at or around 60 to 90 minutes, right? And participants, in terms of their age and or participant criteria, they have to be between the ages of 14 and 24, and they had to have carried a gun within the last year. Keep in mind, when we are completed with this data set, there will be no data set around gun violence, right, that will be this aggressive or robust and or systematic at the ground level, right? And our data set also is going to be made public. Brooklyn site was the first site to begin so that we can all learn from. They have completed their site, right? Those are pictures from their site, right? And collected a little over 103 surveys. We shut it down. There are reasons we can probably address. We can talk a little bit about that during Q&A, but we shut it down after 103 in Brooklyn, right? And that's what the sample overall looks like. Right, we're now in Wilmington, we're on the ground, right? This is what the guys look like out here, right? And that site is also led by Mr. Coley Harris. Next slide. Right, and right now we're at around 52. We just flew back, Coley and myself, from Detroit from training those guys. So they're about to begin data collection soon. And Baltimore is led by Dr. Brooklyn Hitchens, and we'll be probably, God willing, top of this year, beginning with data collection, and also in New Orleans as well. All right, we're ending off now just with we take action very seriously, right? And we just want to share with you from our program over the last 10 years, just other instances or forms of action and activism. Okay, this is DeBar McGriff. DeBar McGriff is one of our street par associates that have done really well. He's actually with his crew of folk, right, particularly for a sub-program called Game Changers. DeBar at this time worked for the ACLU, and he created a program called Game Changers, where they went to the community, right, to train folk, teach folk, educate folk on the criminal justice system. Right? We do a lot of gun violence advocacy, right? We're actually with the folk from the University of Delaware at the Achievement Center on the left-hand side. We were with the dean and the associate dean, right? But on the right-hand side, there is Dr. Jonathan Wilson. He's been with us for the last 10 years. He's gotten his master's and his doctorate while in the program, right? He's originally from Philly, now has returned back to Philly to create the Southwest Philly Street Par program, right? And he's actually at a press conference right now. He's around a lot of the politicians and so forth and so on, and they're really getting busy on that ground around gun violence advocacy. Right? Do you want to?
This is just a photo of one of our PAR members at a training for ceasefire in Philadelphia with a councilwoman.
And so this is just a photo of one of the scenes from Out of the Ashes. It's a drama therapy presentation, and that's a scene there where my son and I are reenacting our first encounter post-incarceration.
And this play is going down next week, November 6th, right, on Saturday, at
At the Congo Legacy Center in Wilmington, Delaware, 28th and Madison Street, Wilmington, Delaware.
What time?
It's from 11. It's going on at 11. The whole presentation is from 11 till 3.
So this is just to highlight some of the housing work that we're doing. So as Coley mentioned, most of the folks in this picture are referred from PAR associates. And so because, especially during the pandemic, a lot of folks were being evicted illegally right from their homes because there was eviction moratorium. So we spent from, I would say, March through like July canvassing. So this is one of our canvases where we were telling people, hey, if they try to evict you, they cannot. There's a moratorium. Here's resources. Here's information. Delaware Housing Assistance Program will pay your rent. A lot of folks did not know that these resources existed. Through those conversations, what we learned is a lot of folks don't know their rights. So last Saturday, we just started tenant rights workshops so that we can teach people like, hey, these are your rights as a renter. So again, if a landlord tries to take advantage of you, like, here's what you should know. And so those, again, some of the guys that did the canvassing with us, we are now bringing them into the fold to run these tenant workshops. And the goal is to create a tenant union so that people are empowered and to try to shift, right, that power differential between landlords and renters. Similar to what Coley said, in the state of Delaware, the housing wage, the way they talk about it, there's a organization, the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and you can look up your state, National Low Income Housing Coalition, and it will tell you what the housing wage is in your state. In Delaware, a 1-bedroom apartment, you need to make at least $18 an hour to afford it, working 40 hours a week. If you want a 2-bedroom apartment, it's about $25 an hour. And so we push for housing wages, and we don't pay any of our members less than $20 an hour to honor, right? We talk a lot about the theory, but we want to make sure we're putting it into practice.
Right.
So these are screenshots actually from our Youth Participatory Action Research Program that we did over the summer. Actually, we ran it out of the Center for Structural Equity. And I see Gabrielle Sherba in the back. I'm going to shout you out. She's an undergrad that worked with us over the summer. She actually created that Housing Jeopardy on the left-hand side. We tried to make it fun for the kids, right? It's all about youth development, specifically social justice youth development, and really using youth culture right through our own mechanisms. And so they were on TikTok all the damn time, making TikTok videos all the damn time. And so we're like, all right, make a TikTok video about housing, about what you can learn. So those are a couple screenshots where they, talked about eviction, housing discrimination, and that's just a photo. That's some of the content of what we were teaching them, right? The fact that, just going back to this racial component, right? The fact that Black folks have historically and currently are disproportionately pushed out of housing opportunities. And even if you get housing opportunities, you can see in that raw story, this woman basically, when she removed anything that let the assessor know that there were Black folks living in the house, her house appraised at $100,000 more. So these are the kinds of content that we were discussing with the youth over the summer, and then it culminated in this development of TikToks.
All right, so keep in mind, right, PAR. There's a couple of criticisms that we write or we make note of as it relates to the PAR literature, right? And we can be critical, and we do a very aggressive brand of PAR. Most folk who are doing PAR are not actually doing it in the way that we are doing it, right? So we do believe in doing action and activism in some of the more traditional ways, organizing, mobilizing, getting boots on the ground, organizing programs and events. Right, that is true too. But we also, right, and a lot of the PAR literature, some of it, right, sometimes rejects and/or can trivialize the participation in scholarship, right, which is pretty ironic, right? So we're big on using and publishing from the data in traditional platforms or outlets as a form of action and activism. A lot of policy, a lot of laws, a lot of what they're able to do to you in terms of criminalizing folk and punishing folk, right, is because of that literature and the fact that they have dominated the narrative. So street PAR is a socio-political project, right? And it's about training them with real skills, not in some watered down way neither, right? To take back the empirical narrative, right? So it's not about doing this in some perfunctory kind of way, right? But as we often say in our presentations, teach the streets regression. Teach them real, right? And at this point, the apprenticeship model is one of the best ways or methods to advance change. And that's really what when the rubber hits the road, that's actually the change in regardless of the industry. That's actually the kind of experience, right, that allows you to transition into your expertise. Some older or more senior mentor, right, leading you by your hand for a period of time. There's only but so much you can learn in the classroom or from the video, or right. And at some point, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and somebody's going to have to walk you through it. And that's how we see Street Par, bringing the doctoral student model down to the street corner. Get them published in the journals too. And let's take back that narrative. There's nobody, right, we're convinced, that knows the streets better than the streets. They just need the skill set, right? So these are just some examples of the articles in which we've published over the years around women in the streets, opportunity in the streets in terms of jobs and schools, right? We also publish on the method itself, Street Par, right? This is Woofy. This article came out last year for those of us who know Woofy or Daryl Chambers. And all he does is regressions. He don't want to know nothing about no interviews and no ethnography. All he's going to do is run regressions and GIS all day.
Yep.
Right. And that's what you see in that article. He also did the statistical analysis for this paper on policing as well. Right. We also believe in using the media for justice. This also comes up in the street ethnography literature as well. Knowing how to have a really good relationship or rapport with local media, where there's a lot of good information found in any given city. Right? And we have a good relationship, and sometimes we push back, sometimes we say no. Right? So we have access to national, right, to regional and also local media, and sometimes we say no. We also take writing op-eds seriously. Right? And we're at or around 10 op-eds at this point. This is Corey Wright. This project is highlighting one of his programs, the Urban Bike Project. Right? We're also featured in, for good or for bad, Newsweek's article that they came out with in 2014 entitled Murder Town, USA. That has prompted, or that's where we've co-opted the title for our book project as well. Right? This is Woofy or Daryl. This is Coley, if you can see the picture. That's also Sean and Mark Nadone for Delaware Today, which is the state's magazine. Has done a number of pieces on us or our research program over the years. We also, right, one thing that we've done that I think is unique to our program is, right, we bring local politicians down to the neighborhood. That's Governor Markell and Mayor Williams, right, in which we brought out to 10th and Bennett. That's one of the poorest and most violent, right, in terms of homicides, our street corners in the state. And that's at Jesse's and James's barbershop. That's Mr. Jesse right there in the middle. Right? We also believe in using the arts for action and activism. The arts, interestingly enough, is a great way to be loud and a great way to do action or community mobilization. Right? And we follow the tradition of the Black arts movement, right, which believed at that time not to do art for the sake of art. They weren't about no Jay-Z and no Beyonce. I don't know where your politics are in terms of them, right? But they were about really, whether it's music, whether it's design, whether it's whatever, right, to really do it from and for, right, from the perspective of, but for the people. Any other art was rejected by the BAMS movement at that time. You had to get out of here with all of that. If it was about sex or getting high or drunk, right, and then calling that art, they was going to run you right out the room. Right? And so we're following in that tradition. Right? So we do film. About 800 people showed up here to the University of Delaware to watch our first iteration of the People's Report. Next slide. We do lots of panels. A panel followed that debut of that documentary. We do lots of art shows, real art shows too, in high-end art centers. That contrast is really wonderful, right? So 50 local artists, Black and brown, right? Who produced 276 pieces of art, right? And they was debuted in the main gallery at the Delaware Center for Contemporary Arts at the riverfront in the city of Wilmington. About 1,000 people showed up in a space that can only fit 500 on the first night. We also believe in doing musical, right? And these are ideas that are coming from the streetcar associates and local residents, right? So we've put out our second mixtape project, these projects that we host and finance. We'll get the best talent in the local area, R&B, singers, poets, right? On one album that we host, right? And the latest one is called Knowledge is the New Hustle. We also do mixtape release parties. Oh man, we're a research program. We do release parties, free food, free everything. It's always on us. All right, these are a few breakout talents from the Wilmington Street Park Research Program and/or awards and accomplishments by some folk individually. This is DeBar McGriff. Sometimes they call him Doobie, really popular guy in the city of Wilmington. Right, he got his BS during the program. He worked for the ACLU. He's now working, he's doing bigger and better things with regard to politicians and all, but we don't have his exact title. But nonetheless, he is well known in the city, and he has done a lot of organizing, continues to do a lot of organizing in these neighborhoods. We have Ashley Randolph, right? She's definitely done a lot. She was working at Barclays before. Now she has went out to Thailand, where she actually teaches English for like the last 2 years. So she said she was coming back, but I think she's having a good time out there. But she's done really well in our program. She's worked for United Way of Delaware. She's enrolled to receive the scholarship to Wilmington University. She was a radio personality here at UD's radio station, right? So, you know, she's definitely our sister. That's Dr. Jonathan Wilson, right? He got his master's. He came with his bachelor's, got his master's, and then he got his doctorate. Now he's the executive director of the Fathership Foundation. I am on the board, right? And he's also the founder of the Southwest Philly Street Park program. And this is our 5-star general. This is the man who made it all possible, meaning through him, we all were able to come together. Without him, this would not be possible, right? This is Darrell Chambers. He's the de facto mayor of the city of Wilmington. He got his MA here in the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice. He also is a research associate. It's research associate for the Center for Drug and Health Studies, which is part of that department. He's also the executive director of the Center for Structural Equity, which houses our program, right? And he's worked with a number of faculty here at UD. We won a couple awards. We'll just highlight a few. Definitely DCJ, Delaware Center for Justice, which I'm on the board. That's Ashley Biden. That's Ashley's mom, Dr. Biden, right? And we won the Vrooman Award, right? And most recently, and I think like last week, we were hanging out, man. We had a really good time. I mean, man, it was a great night. But we won the 2021 Candler Award from the ACLU of Delaware. Yeah, we were at Cafe Gelatos. And this is the featured story for 2016 for The Messenger, right? The university's magazine. We are actually in Bethel Villa, particularly for the first study. This is an area, this is like a low-income apartment complex. And we collected a lot of survey data out of this complex, particularly at night, like around 11, midnight. It gets flooded with folk. So we were taking the photographer and or UD's media all, you know, in and around the streets of Wilmington, you know, and really showing them, I think, a different perspective. But we decided to settle here to take some pictures. All right, that's it, y'all. Thank y'all for hanging out.
I just want to add one thing, because I know we're going to jump to Q&A, is just to highlight the fact that this team, this work is multidisciplinary, it's intergenerational, and it's always focused on praxis, whether it's in the community or in the academy. And so I just wanted to make sure that I said that, and I hope you all saw that, but just to highlight like that we are anchored in, right, taking a very interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach to our work.
Cool. All right. So we're going to transition to Q&A. I think we have 10-ish minutes, maybe a little longer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, concerns, questions? Yes, sir. Dave.
Man, y'all, appreciate y'all. I'm hella tired. Listen. And in hearing you all do this type of work, I'm wondering how you all front load when you are approaching people who do not have the same interests as you, but also may want to fund you.
Oh, man.
Well, you can talk to the funding piece, yes. I will talk to in terms of anytime we bring students or other folks on, we created maybe 3 years ago, I'm looking at Brooklyn, I'm trying to remember, an orientation. So anyone that comes to the program, we tell them, this is Street PAR, this is what we do, this is what we believe. We do not take a deficit approach, right? We are about asset-based. You have to know what the sites of resilience is. You have to understand that street identity is connected to that resilience. And if you want to rock with us, come rock with us. If you don't, we can refer you somewhere else, right? So we make sure that the students and the faculty, whoever we're working with, share our paradigm, right? And if they don't, that's okay, but we're probably not the team for you. So in terms of ideology, that is what we've done. And I don't know, Brooklyn, if you wanted to add anything to that.
I'll just say, just thinking about the long term, like for graduate students who are trying to figure out, like, whether it's you're an undergrad trying to transition to graduate school or beyond, just think about your trajectory as it relates to the research process. So get linked up with people who are doing the work that you want to do and stay with them. Like I've seen a lot of graduate students and undergraduates kind of cycle in and out of our project or other projects, but it's really important for you to stick with your interests, and it really will bode well for you in the long term.
Right. So with regard to funding, I will say, I think for like a grassroots-oriented PAR program, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I think it's safe to say that we do well, right, raising our own support. Right. And I think it's important for folks to know that. I think it's important for folks to know that it is possible, right, to identify a set of scholars, right, meaning at the university. That may not necessarily be the most, meaning most R1 universities, most UD and most R1 are not necessarily, right, poised, right, for scholars to come in and do the work that we are doing. But it's important to say or underscore, right, that there is an example of a research program in the country that's really organized in the neighborhood in a real and authentic way. And this group is able to get its own funding to do this work, right? I think, and we share that really as a way to inspire and empower, right? There are a lot of folk all over the country really doing the work. But a lot of times we feel like we're by ourselves, and we may be by ourselves in those respective areas. But keep in mind, there are a bunch of us that are just swinging away, and just having a strong network, I think I was trained in a PAR doctoral program. I didn't even realize how lucky I was at that time. I thought if you wanted to do PAR, you could actually just do it if you wanted to. Like I was that naive. I'm first generation, everything, right? And then I realized, particularly when I got to UD and I had to do it by myself, but I had the help of Coley and Woofy and all them guys. Right, so they compensated in a large way for me. But I realized, the average person, meaning faculty or student who wants to do this kind of work, like where would they even begin? Not to mention an R1 institution is not really interested in you doing this kind of community engagement. They generally mean a lighter version of that, right? No R1 institution really wants to be put in a position as, right, they have the resources, they can create the kind of change that we all want to see overnight. Yes, that is true. But it doesn't really want to be put in a position, right, where it's directly challenging capitalism or the corporate state. That's the problem. But right now, in an age where community engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice and all those other buzzwords that keeps falling from our tongue, right? So it's hard, right? Given how popular, given how strong the buzz is, it's hard for the university at this point just to take a step back and say, no, we're not interested. It has to make room, but in a way, right, that works. And right now, right, all industries are just figuring out their politics. It's resettling itself. So in the resettling, there's always a window of opportunity. Read some outliers, Malcolm Gladwell. Right? And that's where we stepped in that. There was a window of opportunity in a neoliberal state, particularly in the North, Delaware, where people were talking a lot of justice and the winds were really strong, and we stepped in and we took advantage of those winds. The winds won't blow forever, though. Right? And then what do we do? Well, we're going to keep going, this team, but in general, what do we do? Is a question that we all have to ask and answer. But Dave, yes, we are approached with funding from a bunch of folks for all kinds of reasons. Right. And I think what's really cool with this team, and this is the council, right? We're missing Darrell Chambers. This is the council, though, right? And we really run our team. It's a bottleneck of leadership, right? And then everything, right? and we run it a certain way. PAR is not a democracy, neither. No, it's not. It has democratic principles, right? But it's not a democracy, right? But one thing, right, I really learned from these guys too, whether it's the media or funding, and I mean that literally, they have no problem saying no. You know, man, and we get approached with all kinds of sizes of support. And if it ain't right, no problem saying no. And that's what, you know, I don't know too many academicians like that, including the ones that say they want to do justice and race, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, they'll walk away from $1 million if it ain't right.
I would just say, yeah, all the guys stand very firm on their principles, for sure, all the time. And to Yas's point, excuse me, I didn't come to UD until 2016, but all the work that I talked about would not be possible if I did not have, I'll say permission, right? Like, this is the work that we're going to do because this is what the community needs. And here's the people you should go talk to. Here's the people you should bring onto the team. And so I run it all by them, right? And if there's any issues, also having that network helps, because then I can go back to them and say, hey, like this guy, I don't know, we might need to talk about this more, right? But it's out of love and it's out of care and it's out of respect.
And I just definitely want to make sure to shout out, I hope I haven't forgotten anyone, but if I have, let me know. But definitely Kathleen McGallops, she's on our Street Park family. We also have Dr. Zach Collier. We also have Gabrielle Sherber in the back there. There go my class, y'all, racial stratification. That's what's up. Good to see you. We got Tali and David Haynes. Come on now, can't let me forget y'all, man. Come on. Now. You know, these are all members that are part of the family that are in the audience. Is there anyone that I forgot?
I say, is David Chen in the house?
Oh, Dr. David Chen, where are you? You're part of our family. Where you at? I seen you somewhere. You may not be here now, but he's here and he'll be presenting soon. But he's part of our family too, from Christianity Care Hospital. Cool. Any questions? Last questions? One more? No? Maybe so. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Tarek Anderson. I'm a second year doctoral student at the University of Texas at Austin. So with regard to your asset-based framework, how does your research challenge and respond to deviant and pathological constructions of Black masculinity being advanced within and outside of the academy?
I don't know, anybody?
I feel like that's all you.
That's true, that is me. You know, let me make sure.
It's all you.
Don't want to overwhelm, take over everything. Okay. I'll be honest with you, right? We're about, you know, Street Par is a socio-political project, right? That's designed to respond to scientific colonialism and or the colonizing, particularly in this instance, of Black American communities, right? Part of the colonization process involves, right, how media, but in this case, more specifically, scholars or researchers, right, have poorly framed marginalized communities, right, and the populations within them. And our focus, our goal, our priority is to take those narratives, those dominant, those dangerous and dominant narratives on. Right. At the end of the day, particularly when it comes to the concerns of the communities and definitely of a city like Wilmington, we see ourselves as the experts, right? Not the other way around. So we see, right, the empirical project of institutions of higher learning, right, is really being an instance of empire, right? Whether they're liberal, whether they're conservative, whether they're Black, whether they're brown, or whether they're white, they're not their friends. No, they're not. Right? And that is Derek Bell's message. And most of us are naive to what is actually going on. The pain and suffering of Black populations in it of it by itself is a multi-billion-dollar market just for the academy alone. Right? And if you want to be an academician and do really well, particularly at an R1 institution, or if you really want to get the big award and be on the New York Times bestseller list, find you a poor Black population then and write about it. Right? That's what's really going. And so what's the job if you really want a job here? The job is really to find a way to justify and legitimize, right, the status quo, the inequality, right? Not to liberate and empower. No, 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 no. So with that in mind, right, we propose our own theories, thus sites of resilience theory, right? We're all about the business of we're going to have to go back to the basics and recreate all of this, right? More specifically, with regard to your question, I do take on Black masculinity. I have a different take on Black masculinity and or that argument. I'm probably more in the theoretical spirit of a Tommy Curry or something like that. Right? Read his book, Man Not, one of the best books written on Black masculinity. The top masculinity scholars in the country right now are not Black men. They are white feminists. We do not control our narratives, right? Most Black and brown dominant narratives are not dominated by Black or brown scholars, maybe in some little niche way. But the top criminal justice researchers or the top scholars on Black folk in schools are white people. Derek Bell writes about this in Faces at the Bottom of the Well. Well, how else would they be able to colonize you, right? They have to dominate all areas or activities of your life, including your scholarship. The theories, the concepts, the words, you've all been seeded with it a long time ago, particularly with those stories about, Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy and all that. That's just seeding your mind. So no, we do not make arguments on Black men being toxic. They're not. And there are not anybody doing any real research on that neither. They're just making it up. There is no research program in the country that can collect the data at a large enough level like ours to even test the argument. Right? You would actually have to get out there and collect 5, 1,000, 1,500 surveys from those guys on the street corners. That's the only way you can test these ideas. So these arguments around toxicity or hyper, sexuality or, right? These are just arguments that are just from, right? Black men don't love their children. Black boys don't like learning in school. There is no empirical evidence to support any of these claims. And when the very few of us are able to actually study it in a systematic way, right? Look at the literature, forget what I'm saying. But when the few of us are able to do it, right, we find no evidence of this. Keep in mind, right, if Black boys didn't like learning or people from the street don't like school, then how could we do street par at the level that we're doing it? And we're doing it in the communities. That's why it's important for them to tell their narrative and do their own research, because you see what happens when all the good folk who smile all the time do their analysis. You hear things like Black men don't think it's masculine to cry. What are you talking about? Like, you know how many often they cry in front of us and it's not seen as a negative thing? Right? That's why we do street par. I'll leave you with this message, and I do say this in my talks, by the way. Brooklyn can vouch for me. Strong, heterosexual Black men, particularly with a little bit of an edge, they are out. They are removed from every major industry, particularly the Black American ones, from hip hop to the academy. There is a systematic assault on that group. And I don't say that, right, to go against any other group of men. That's not the point. I shouldn't even have to say that. But what I am saying is, right, they are included too, and their perspectives are just as smart, just as valid as any other else's groups or perspective on gender or family or anything else. And we got to make room for them. In the academy, up to and including the Black scholars within the academy, are at the forefront in making sure these men and their voices and perspectives are removed. So that's why street par shows up and we get right in the way. And we're saying, no, no more, no more, no more. We control the narrative, right? We also call it the union. You just can't come out to Wilmington and say you want to do some research. No, we ain't going to do nothing to you personally or physically, right? But there is a process. You do have to receive permission. We're just not going to let you come through, right? We're responding to Wade Noble's argument of scientific colonialism. Our communities are just so porous, and the amount of money and prestige just being made off of it. At some point, we have to stand up, right? Until all of that's figured out, that's where we come in at. And we will knock on your door respectfully, politely, because we want to understand not only your role and or your project in the community, but your theoretical perspective. And if you're gonna come around here talking about all the men are crazy and all the women are great, then you got to go. You are the problem, right? And it's about restoring a real sense of socioeconomic and political empowerment through a research project. 1 project, 2 project, 3 project, 4, all in the same city across space and time. I've never seen anything create so much change so swiftly than a park project. All right. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? All right, y'all. I think our time is done. All right. Thank y'all so much for coming down. We really appreciate it. And David Chin and Zach Collery in 10 minutes or so when it picks back up.
Yeah,
Will be beginning their concurrent session in this room, which will be an extension off of and or showing you some other analysis of work that we're doing from this program.